I want you
Come on.
to, oh,
You good.
okay. Good evening, everybody. This is Pastor Jay from World Outreach Campus. I want you to tag your friends. I want you to type somebody's name in this. I want you to get ready. This is going to be an unusual Wednesday night life in the Word time for us at the World Outreach Campus. We're going to share with you some important information. We're going to talk about some very important things, and I have some special guests who are going to be with me. I'm telling you, this is going to be one of those times that you want to have your friends, you want to have your family, you want to have people who agree with you and people who don't agree with you prepared, because this session tonight is going to be really critical. So I'm going to give you a few moments so that you can go ahead and tag somebody, tag your friends, and tag your family members, and let them know that World Outreach Campus is on the air, that we're live on Facebook and we're live on YouTube, and that very quickly now we're going to be talking about some things that are really critical. We know what time this is. We know the day that we're living in, and I'm just excited that you're going to be able to be blessed and privileged to hear some great information. So I'm going to give you a couple more minutes. I want you to go ahead and I want you to tag in those of you from the World Outreach Campus family. You know how we do it. I wanted you to put your name up on the screen, and I wanted to make sure that you're telling the people that you care about that we're on. Um, uh, we're going to try. This is going to be available after the night, but tonight it's going to be live. It's going to be fresh, and so we want you to chime in. Want you to know that we're praying for all of our family members that are experiencing the sickness, are experiencing challenges within their family. We have some bereavement notices in our church family. We're praying for those families. You know that we're reaching out to you and we're touching you. We're praying for those who are in the homes and the shut in and sick, and those who are in repose in those comfort areas. We just want you to know that we're caring about you. We're concerned about everything that you do. The days coming up, we're going to have some special things for our young people. I want you to be aware. Parents at the campus, be on the lookout for some information from First Lady and the Youth Ministry team for something exciting that's going to happen at the end of the month. Plan now to set aside some time. We're going to be praying for all of you in just a moment. I want to introduce to you persons who are going to be with us tonight, and then we're going to go into our session. The first person I want to introduce to you is a gentleman that I have known pretty much my whole life. He's a local individual. We were just talking earlier. He started his professional career at the age of 25, right out of college. Has been in some of the most important positions in the region, in the community, and he even spent some time with one of the largest employers in our region, the Dow Chemical. He's been with the city of Saginaw. He's done so many things, and he's a former athletic star from Saginaw High. I want you to meet the president of the Saginaw branch of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, Terry Pruitt. Come on in, Terry. How you doing?
Well, I'm glad to be with you this evening and glad to accept the invitation. First of all, I just want to say, too, that we share in the prayers for those who are ill and suffering through the whole COVID-19 and other issues in their lives. But I'm a very spiritual person, and I understand the power of prayer, and so we join you in those messages.
Thank you, Terry. For many people that don't know that you see him all the time in these powerful positions in the community and government and politics, but he's a very, very important pillar at the church that he attends. It's Christ Community Church, and he has been a deacon and a minister there for a long time. He's a singer too, so we may get him to sing today, but
Uh,
that's not the primary purpose.
it's funny that you mentioned that. I don't want to take any time, but you know where I was today with Damona in the studio down in Flint recording a song.
Is that right? Go ahead, man. It's Mona Reed,
Trying to
one of
make
the
a stop.
talented persons in our town. Let me introduce the next person for those of you who don't know. I want to tell you that this gentleman and I have a almost 40-year relationship. We wound up in college together, and it's strange because we have a lot of opinions that differ, but we have such a long, deep fidelity to each other because while we were in college, we met in college, and we were in the same fraternity in college, and but we found ourselves bonded together, and then he wound up here in Saginaw, and when I came back home after being away for a while. We connected again, and we've been close friends ever since then. Many of you have seen him, you've heard him, you've talked with him. He he's an entrepreneur, he's an inventor, he's a creator, he's a leader, he's a mentor. He is a Republican strategist. He's one of the persons that the Republican Party calls on all the time, but he is also a great leader in the private sector, and he's the executive director of the Association of Building Contractors. I wanted you to meet Jimmy Green. Come on in, Jimmy. There he is.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, Pastor. And I refer you that with that title tonight. Thanks so much for having me. I quite frankly would have accepted the invitation had you asked me alone. But when you told me that Terry Pruitt and then our next guests were on, I thought it was a great opportunity, and I hope that this was the intent of that, of having people who may have differing views politically, but recognize that we desire the same outcomes.
Yeah.
You know, I know our next guest very well. I know Terry very well. I've taken and listened to his counsel. It's just nice to have this sort of respect out there, and unfortunately, we see too little of it. Everything's so toxic and so divisive, and you know, I think our leaders are doing an absolutely terrible job at that. And I think sometimes we have to be citizens that actually lead our leaders. And I hope that forums like this give people an opportunity to see that discourse is healthy when outcomes are desired the same way. So thank you so much. I appreciate the invite.
Thank you, Jimmy, for being so kind to me. It's always good to be in the company of great friends, people that you can trust that they're going to be straight up with you. And I echo your sentiments about our next guest, because for those of you who have been around Saginaw for a year, her last name is a name that's well known in political circles and in community circles, because her father is what we call, we would even be able to call him a legend in local politics. John Pugh created so many opportunities for people to not only be educated and engaged, and Terry knows him well because as a member of NAACP, it is John Pugh who has been a spearhead of a lot of issues, primarily the AXO that engages young people at so many different levels. His daughter, for those of you who are not aware, Pamela Pugh is a member of the Michigan State Board of Education and an officer, vice president, I think vice chairperson. I think she's the vice chairperson of the board. You can correct me when she comes on. But she's also been active in politics on so many levels and has done so many things. She now also serves the National Democratic Party, on national committees. She's all over the country. She's sought after as a speaker. She is a PhD in public and community health. And I want you to please appreciate our next guest who will be with us, Dr. Pamela Pugh. She's a wonderful member of the World Outreach Campus. We're so proud of her. Hi, Pam.
Hello, good evening, and I'm just so happy to be here. And yes, I do definitely have huge shoes to follow in and stand in with both of my parents. And I also, as you said, am a member of the World Outreach Campus, and where I have wonderful leadership in Pastor Hurley Coleman and First Lady Sandra Coleman, and some things you just have to do when you have those type of people that encircle you. And so I thank you, Pastor Jay, for your leadership, your continued leadership, and just happy to be a part of this conversation.
Great. Let's start with the prayer. I want you all to join me in prayer. Just bow your heads with me. Father God, we're thankful that you've given us this privilege of communication. You've given us the privilege of extending our hearts to the people who will connect with us. There are people who will be listening to us, who are anxiously waiting to hear what the next move is, what's really behind the scene, what's behind all of this thing, the things that are going on, what's the source of the problems and the issues, and how do we make ourselves available and impact getting through it. So I pray, God, that you would not only give us wisdom, that you would give us power, but that you'd always also bless us that we might fulfill the purpose that you've designed for us in this time. We pray this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. I want to start this out for you with a passage of scripture that is in the book of First Timothy. And this is what it says. Apostle Paul writes to his young mentee about the role that he has in teaching and in providing for the things that he has to lead people. It says this. It says, first of all, then I urge that petitions, prayers, intercessions, and thanksgiving be made for everyone, for kings and all those who are in authority, so that we lead a peaceful and quiet life in all godliness and dignity. This is good and it pleases God our Savior. I wanted to use that passage of scripture to encourage anyone who is concerned that we're taking time like this, that we usually use with Bible study, and we're talking about civic activity. We're talking about civic movement and political activity and the investment of individuals in the political process. Because even back in the days of the early church, there was an interest that had to happen where the people of faith would be influencing things that happen in the world. That we were the ones to pray for the king, to pray for the authorities. And just the other day, preaching Sunday morning before I preached, I prayed for our president because I certainly want God to bless him. I want God to bless him. I have a certain thing that I really want God to bless him with. And because I'm politically motivated, I'll tell you one of these days. I did a quick search, my friends. I did a quick Google search on the impact of the faith community in politics in Google. And guess what I found out? I found out that since 1947, scholarly writings in the evangelical movement have been pushing the evangelicals toward activity in the political environment because they felt that other voices were more represented than theirs. Since 1947, you can go back to the days of Ronald Reagan when you started to see the beginning of the evangelical movement being involved in politics. It's always leaned strongly right from the conservative perspective, but recently they have become one of the driving forces in our community, in the African American community. The Black church has always been the seat of not only leadership for the community, for faith leadership, but also great leadership in politics and government and everything else. As a matter of fact, it is the Black church that was the initiation of Black education, Black leadership, Black elected officials. Most of the early Black elected officials came out of the church. And so it's with that in mind that we're reaching out to indicate to you all that it's time for us to make sure that we step in. And I think it's better to do that with some information. So I want to open this up, and I'm going to ask that each one of you start out tonight's conversation by just giving us your sense, your opinion about why it's more important this year to be actively involved. In fact, what is significant about this particular election, and why are you so personally committed to it? Let me start with you, Terry, and then from the perspective of the NAACP and the involvement that you've always had. And I want you to consider the fact that we've got about an hour of time to spend, but I want everybody to have an opportunity to fully express themselves. So there's a level of cogency that I'd like you to have. But Terry, can you start out by just giving us the foundation of why you're engaged and so committed to political activity, and why this year is so significant, why this election is so significant?
Well, as someone who's been a part of the political process for many, many years, in fact, decades, I have never considered myself a political activist. But I've thought more of myself as a political educator and a political participant. And when I look back over my life in the last 2, 3 decades, um, we get to a point, and I think we mentioned, we heard it earlier in a couple of the comments that Mr. Green made. We're at a point in this nation where there is so much toxicity, so much polarization, so much what I would call confining ideology. Everybody has to be in a box. I was listening to a podcast recently with Jim Baker, who is one of those Republicans that I have a great deal of respect for. He wrote a book and he talked about the art of compromise. And in the conversation, he's in his late 90s now, but he was just appalled at the inability of leadership to sit down and compromise and solve the problems of the nation. So for me, in 2020, as I sit here and look at the work that has to be done and the kind of information that comes my way, I say that we have to have no other choice than to try to reach out and unify this country to solve the real problems, especially the problems of people of color. We've got any number of issues that are on the table, beginning with law enforcement reform, better educating our children. We have to do a better job of bringing this community together to solve some of those issues and problems, and we have to do it in a way that dispenses with some of the polarization and toxicity that I see out there now.
That's great. Jimmy Green, tell me what you think. What is so significant about this particular election, and why are you so deeply invested in it?
Pastor, I've never not been, as you well know. I mean, I've never missed a vote, whether that's primary, local, state, federal. I have always been an active voter. My grandparents were huge in public advocacy in Flint, so I got it as part of my DNA. My grandmother was one of the chief political strategists for then Governor Romney back in the 60s, and so she was a power broker in Flint. So I've always recognized the power. And remember, Flint had black mayors long before black mayors were popular, and it was an interesting time for me. And I still see it to this day. I think every election is the most important election, and the reason I say that is because everything we have today is as a result of the most important election prior to it, as will the next election. And so I think it's vitally important, and for me, I'm telling you what, I'm in a terrible political position for the very first time in my life. I'm too Republican for Democrats, and I'm too Democratic for Republicans. I find myself in this unenviable role of being an independent, which has no home. I am a man without an island. I certainly appreciate the virtues of capitalism and free enterprise, and I tend to caucus more with Republicans in that vein. But at the same time, I see where social issues from the Republican Party are infringing on my social advocacies. I just got off a call. I'm the treasurer with the LGBT group Perceptions. I'm strong in civil rights. I'm strong in a lot of social issues that impact Black people. When you talk about law and order, there's so many different things that I find myself in just this terrible, terrible quandary. And so I'm fighting through that, quite frankly, because for me, it tears at the soul a little bit. It's this balance of, commerce versus social versus commerce. And I would strongly suggest, and the reason I advocate so strongly, and I have a lot of young Black mentors or mentees in particular, I stress that we as a people not allow ourselves to be pigeonholed in either party. I don't want Black people to be Republicans because I don't think Republicans have opened the door for them to be welcome. But at the same time, I don't want all of our fortunes lying on the other side of that aisle too, especially on the progressive side, which has kind of vacated a lot of Black moderates, a lot of Black conservatives that even tend to vote Democrats. I don't know what this election is going to be. I just know how vitally important it is right now to have your voice exercised, because I know without any shadow of a doubt, and I think all of you would agree because you're so politically astute, even after the election, there won't be an after the election. It will be weeks, maybe even months before we settle this country. And I think at the very last thing each of us can do individually is to say we exercise our right. If there's ever a time where we had to be selfish, inverted, it's this year. I did my part, and I don't know how this is going to shake out, Pastor. But for me, I've always been a strong advocate of voting. I see how vital it is as a people, as a nation, especially as a community of Black folks who continue to press upon the rights that may very well be vacated in any administration. So,
Okay. Well, Pam, you are obviously you are the last person to make your first statement, if I could say it like that. Let me just ask you if you can take advantage of what has already been said, and then position this conversation for the next level, for the next place that we need to go. Because I asked if this was a critical election. You are involved. Are you involved more this year than ever before? Why is this election so critical to you?
So, I think that this election, I know, let me not say I think, this election is not Republican and Democrat. To me, this election is sanity versus insanity in the White House. And I'm so happy to hear Brother Jimmy I don't, say what he said, because I'm at the point right now, if you are not choosing the right side, or if you're choosing the wrong side, let me say, uh, we can't talk at this point. So, and I'm also happy to hear Harry talk about this space where he's hoping that we can get to, because for me right now, it's about voting in sanity into the White House. And this is the most critical election that we've ever seen, where we have 7 million people who have died of COVID. And yes, it is not a totally man-made disaster, but we do know that the current administration has totally alienated and stepped aside from science, and in handling this case, and have totally politicized this. We know that 40% of Black businesses have shuttered their doors in April. We have a very high unemployment rate at this time. And this is because we have an administration that has been so dogged after they have made wrong choices in politicizing this global pandemic. And so now, as a country, we're seeing ourselves far worse than countries who have far less resources than we have. So here we are at the worst time of our history, my history, that we have someone who's in the White House who has made several missteps, and those missteps continue to worsen. So it is very critical that we vote. And for me, it's very critical that we all know who we are going to vote out, that we know that we're going to vote out that hate. We're going to vote out that person who is so focused on themselves that they cannot see the greater good. They're willing to sacrifice our democracy, our freedoms, and the country that we know. So I am voting Biden Harris. I've never been so assured of who I would be voting for. Are they perfect? No, but there's no wider gap than we've seen ever before in my lifetime, with the differences in the two candidates that we have before us.
For those of you who are watching, I want you to know that I have asked, excuse me, I've asked Jimmy and Pam to be comfortable in being as partisan or nonpartisan or direct as they feel about candidates, about issues. And as representing NAACP, I know that Terry, you won't take a partisan position, but you have some very strong opinions about some of the issues that are at work. I mean, there are a lot of things that happen on the ballot that aren't partisan, that have to do with how our community is impacted. And so at some point in time, I hope that you all, and for those of you who are watching, you're going to have an opportunity maybe to ask questions if we have time. We'll entertain it. And you want to engage in dialogue about what you're hearing, please feel free to do that, because I think as both Pam and Jimmy have said, and as Terry is indicated, there's got to be dialogue. We've got to be able to talk through even issues that we disagree on so that we can come to grips with what's best for us. Terry, in your time of being actively involved and encouraging people to vote, what do you think are the biggest hurdles to getting people to the polls this year?
I think it's a continuing theme. You talk to people who haven't been very active in the voting process. It's the same response. I don't really think my voting makes that much of a difference. Those people are going to do what they want to do anyway. They don't speak for me. They don't represent me. They don't act for me. They don't listen to me. So I think therein lies part of the dilemma, as you characterize it, Jimmy, of trying to get to those people to make sure that they understand. I mean, I have to stand on a platform that says, look, the first solution that we of people of color have to solving any of our major problems in this country is through voting and having representation that truly speaks for us, understands the needs and the concerns that we have, and will approach those in a way that if doesn't get us all the way there, that there's a clear track record of effort that's trying to get us there.
Well, Pam, what do you think about that, the apathy that Terry is describing? At the same time that that is the case, there are some structural things that are being put in the way that really impact access to voting and the notion of voting. This whole idea of voters, what is it, voter
Suppression.
suppression. How do you, from your perspective, how do you look at that?
So we have voter suppression, and of course we've always had it. Again, we've never seen it in the way that we've seen it unleashed and coming from the top, from President Trump down, and really enforcing that and encouraging that. So we've seen mailboxes literally picked up and moved out of the way so people can't mail their ballots. We've seen boxes that have gone to the wrong place because they were intentionally put out for mischief. Having said that, we still have to vote, and we still have to have a plan, and we have to know with no doubt that we're going to get out and vote and cast our ballot, have our voice. And so in no other time in my lifetime have we had to make sure that people have a plan to make sure that they're voting. On the other end of voter suppression, I would say to the right, you have the voter suppression. To the left, you have voter enthusiasm suppression. So there are people who have never voted before, never participated in this democratic system. Some, to Terry's point, have been discouraged, rightfully so, by the two parties and being let down and not feeling that people have really intentionally tried to lift their community up. And so we have those to the left who are discouraging people from voting. They're saying that they're not voting. They're putting it out there on their social media platforms. And in them doing that, because in the Black community, in the communities of color, Black and brown communities, it's about it's about voter turnout. So that's why there's suppression from the right, suppression from the Trump administration. So to keep you from voting, because they know when you vote, you're not voting for them. They know that you're going to vote for their opposition. So they're trying to keep you from voting. That same to the same tune, the people who are those folks on the left who are who are suppressing voters' enthusiasm, uh, they are also suppressing the vote. They are also that vote goes to when that vote doesn't get cast. That is really helps the numbers and helps the math of Donald Trump. And so I saw on somebody's page that said, just because I'm not casting a vote, that does not mean that I'm voting for Donald Trump. Yes, it does, because mathematically, that means that that was a vote that did not get cast for Biden Harris. And that was a vote that would typically go to Biden Harris. So
Now, the truth of it is that what Pam is extolling here is from the filter of a person who's not only been actively involved in politics from the Democratic position, but who sees a lot of structural things that are happening. I have been watching the Facebook streams, and so many young African Americans are so frustrated with the process. They don't believe that they don't believe in Donald Trump. They don't believe in Joe Biden. And what have you done for me lately? From the filter of the conservative side, Jimmy, how do you respond to what both Terry and Pam have said about both not only apathy, but the structural hindrances that are there for people getting out to vote? Because it may be that there are people who are from the conservative side who are saying they're throwing up their hands too.
Well, I mean, look, let's face it, and we're all political pundits. This is election 101. Republicans vote. They vote in primaries. They vote in local elections. They vote in general. It's a cultural thing. It's not a presidential thing. And that's what I meant earlier when I said the result of where we are today started in primaries. They always do. They start in primaries. They start in local elections. They start in millage votes. They start in how you govern your local community, and it transcends out. It becomes a cultural thing. Every time there's an election, you show up. We've got to demonstrate, and I think we go back to its basics. We have to go back to basics. Look, there's more. I'm more concerned about what a county commissioner does that has more immediate effect on me and my business and my property taxes than the president of the United States. Now, that's not to demean or devalue the power of the White House by any stretch. And to Pam's point, sanity reigns, or should. But we're talking about getting people more involved. And I think, this every 4 years, I've always been concerned. And Pastor Coleman, you and I've had this conversation for years. The fortunes of Black people can't ride every 4 years. It just simply can't. As Democrats go, so go the fortunes of Black people. Well, we had Obama for 8 years. Now we got to wait 4 more. We just can't afford that. And you start by changing. It's like anything else. I mean, sometimes we never get to see an oak tree to its full fruition. But if you plant a seed, you just know that it'll grow. And I think we need to get back to real core basics and talk about these city council elections, and because these are people who come from our community. Let's face it. Trump and Biden, those are people who are figureheads. They're mythology figures to a lot of people. But the people who vote at city councils, and when you talk about voter suppression, there's no question about that. I think when I look at, and that's why I said I've always been on the wrong side of Republicanism when it comes to that. I've always felt like Republicans made a stupid strategic move by simply not convincing Black people to vote for them. Take them to the polls. Talk about the virtues of conservatism. Talk about some of the economic values that come with republicanism. But the moment you say, we don't want you to vote at all, well, I already question what your motives are, and which means I'm certainly not going to listen to your items. So I think, to Pam's point, there are, without a question, those things that are out there. And, they're so big. Sometimes people just give up. I really think all of us, whether you're independent, you're Democrat, whether you're, nonpartisan, whatever that is, we need to get back to our young people and talk about the power of voting as it applies to their address. Something so big out there, we need to start talking about our home address. What impacts you on your home address? And that's really how you cultivate that. It's one of the reasons why I worked with Henry Marsh, and we started the Henry Marsh, Public Policy Institute. It was just for that reason, to get back to local politics. These grandiose things are so big out there. Those things that come in and literally kill the enthusiasm for voting. I see it. I read it all the time. We're smart enough to kind of throw that stuff out with, throw the baby out with the bathwater. But let's get back to just basic voting and how it applies and how it impacts our local, our local areas, and build a culture. We're not going to fix this overnight. I think this is a good election to do that, though. Following up on both Terry and Pam.
I can't be dismissive though about what the big picture looks like, because that conversation on the top level really, in fact, influences the way people are hearing things. It influences the value of what we're doing, and to demean a large public by saying that they don't matter, it really impacts how people feel about the local level. Think about this.
Can I just real quick? I'm sorry but let me explain what I'm talking about real quick, Pastor. What I'm talking about, we watch these Supreme Court hearings right today. When we watch, presidents don't make laws. When we're talking about voting rights, when we're talking about the Affordable Care Act, when we're talking about that, those folks, they come out of your city council people. They come out of county commissioners. They come out of state politics. Those people aren't born there. We have to get back into a process where we actually send our people there. And that starts here. So but by any stretch, I'm not saying that out there doesn't matter, but they're out there. Biden and Trump are out there. One of them is going to win. At some point, though, there has to be a birth. There has to be a birth of a new voter, a new black voter. And if this is the year for it, by looking at those senators who you might oppose, who rushed Amy through, whatever that is, those people come from our communities. And if we don't start vesting what goes out there to Washington, D.C., Trump's going to go. Is it 4 years or 8 years, just like Obama did? Those people who make laws and rules and put Supreme Court justices on the bench, those people stay for years. They don't have term limits.
Okay. Well, Terry, if we want to follow the path, the track that Jimmy's kind of directing us to, that Pam indicated was such a glaring need on that level, what would you say are the prevailing issues in Saginaw County that people ought to be thinking about when they go to the polls?
Let me just comment first of all on a couple of comments that I heard from Pam and Jimmy. First of all, because of the polarization in this nation today, the bully pulpit matters. I would not disagree at all, because we work very hard in midterm elections and things, and the message, Jimmy, that you just espoused is the very same message that we talk about all the time in midterm elections. In fact, I have been often quoted as saying the midterm elections, when we're electing local and state officials, is far more important than what we have to do every 4 years. But here's the problem. We've got too many local people who are candidates who are trying to align themselves with these national figures, trying to be in their camp, trying to speak like them, trying to be more conservative than the next person, trying to be more liberal or progressive than the next person. So the message trickles down. I should even use the word trickle. The message is very comparable to what we hear in the messaging that's coming out of Washington. So there's a tremendous amount of influence. I look at the work that I've done over the last 4 or 5 years, the number of complaints we get in our office around racism and discrimination. And we know what the source of some of that is. We can plant a lot of that at the feet of our current president. People are emboldened. They just say and do whatever they want to say. I mean, I've been in conversations this week with two African-American gentlemen who were stereotyped, and one at the hospital who actually picked up a piece of paper off the ground and was accused of stealing someone's wallet. And the person, eventually a white person, found the wallet at home, but he was still terminated. I'm fighting that battle right now, and it's racist as hell. It really is. So my point is simply this. We have got to look at the inequity, the inequality. There was a question posed to Amy Coney Barrett today. Did she feel that discrimination and racism still exist in this country? And she very skillfully averted answering the question. But that's the kind of thing that's got to come to the table. We've got to accept that it's still here, it's still there, and the battle goes on to fight racism and discrimination in this country. And to me, that's wrapped up in all of the oppression and the suppression that we're talking about, because some of that's got to change. It's going to take not only local leadership but national leadership to address it. Let's be very, very basic again, as Jimmy said. For people of color, especially Black people, the federal government is what we've turned to in many, many instances to solve some of these issues, or at least to get them addressed. When you talk about housing, when you talk about education, all those things started to turn the corner for us when the federal government says, listen, states and local governments, we're not going to let you do what you've been doing to Black people.
Well, I think you hit on a very important point. And to think about the federal government makes some people just crazy, because they don't know how to touch the federal government. Here's what I'm concerned about. I'm concerned that the Saginaw Public School Board has openings that will be filled through this election. The Saginaw Public School has put a bond issue on the ballot. The Saginaw Township School Board has openings that will be filled. The Saginaw City Council, the Saginaw County Commission, the township boards. I saw for the first time and I thought about it. I said, there's a Parks and Recreation Commission that I could run for in Saginaw County. And I come from Parks and Recreation. I said, man, maybe I should be a politician. But there are bond issues. There are judges in the state of Michigan, Supreme Court judges. There is a heated contest for state senator, for U.S. senator. There is, for the first time, an African American who's running for representative in a district that represents a portion of the Saginaw Township. For the first time, there are individuals who are running at local and state levels, and there are issues, voting issues. How confident, Pam, can people be that their vote is going to make a difference, that it'll even get counted?
When we look at, we could look at several elections. We could look at the 2016 election, and I think, was it 11,000?
Just a little
that Michigan went to for a whole state of Michigan. We have to know that our vote counts, and we've seen it. We've seen it right before our eyes. Can't remember the year, but it was when Carl Mack Williams won his first seat for state representative, and that was when they pretty much hand counted the ballots. They would put them through the machine. It was three of us, my dad, Parrish Anderson, and myself, and I can't remember. I think it was three of us. We were sitting in the basement of City Hall when those votes were being counted, and he won. I can't remember. Terry, you might remember. It was like 9 or 11 votes. And we went and knocked on the door and told Carl that he won. Carl came to the door with his robe on, and he was so surprised that he won. So that was a 95th district state representative race that won by 9 or 11 votes. When they did the recount, it went down by a few. So we've seen it happen. And I want to go back to the last question, because I want to talk about the people on the left. Because one of the things that I've heard a lot of my friends on the left talking about is this whole issue of policy. Pastor Jay, you're a policy person. Jimmy, you're a policy person. Terry, you're a policy person. We know that when it comes to policy and getting policy passed, you have to be able to count. I have to be able to know when I go to the State Board of Education table that I have friends and allies with me who the numbers will add up and the vote will pass. This is the same thing at any other table. You can't get policy passed if you're losing the people and allies. So when we talk about policy, we have to start before we get to 30 days outside of the election, a year outside of the election. We have to be talking about policy some time ago. And I'm a policy person. I'm with everybody when they talk about policy, and I will go to the white blank sheet of paper with you and write out some policy. But we can't start that conversation today. Today it's about voting. And then on the other side, then we pick up this conversation about policy, and whoever goes into that seat, we can talk for 4 years about what policy, how we want to see policy shaped before they go on to that next 4 years. So I wanted to get that piece out too.
And some of what we have to deal with policy is the preparation of the persons who we will count on to develop that policy. And so if we don't get people at an early age engaged in the process to think politically, they won't be engaged enough to want to be political and then possibly run. There's a need for some help to change the guards, to transition from people my age to the people younger than me to the people younger than that. And I feel like right now I think that there's a bubbling cauldron of just dissatisfaction in a generation of people who can probably determine who will be the next president, who will be the next representative. There's enough of you who are watching me now, who are in that age group at 40 and under. You can decide who the next person will be on the city council, whatever. But you can't sit back and say that it doesn't matter. You have to really become engaged. And sometimes people don't want to be engaged because they don't think that they know enough. Jimmy, how do you respond to a person who says, well, I really don't know enough about politics to really get involved? How do you encourage them to very quickly, because we only got 2 or 3 weeks before this is over with. People can actually vote now. You can actually vote now.
Well, that's kind of funny because most politicians I know don't know enough about what they need to know about either, which gives the power to the lobbyists, needless to say, because we know exactly what they need to know about what we do or what we want them to vote on. I love Pam's point about whip counting, because that's absolutely right. You got to play politics before you play policy, because there is nothing worse than being in the minority with a great idea of policy, because it ain't going nowhere. The power's in the majority. And, and I'm so glad we have friends here, because I get people all mad at me when I start talking about politics. But look, I look at Republicans. Republicans 4 years ago, made a concerted effort that they were going to sacrifice everything but the U.S. Senate. They poured money in it. They raised campaign. This Amy Barrett thing, that was all calculated. It was inevitable. This was not accidental. Unfortunately, they had to wait for somebody to die. But this was well thought out. It wasn't just, hey, let's seize the moment. They created the moment. And so you do, and as ugly as it may seem, sometimes, politics is a hard game and you got to play it. And I think, Democrats have a tendency to want everybody to like them. Republicans don't. Like, they really don't. Republicans don't care. It's like the president thing. I laugh all the time when people say, I can't believe the Republicans follow the president. They're not following the president. They're following that pin, the pin that he holds. Republicans are dogmatic when it comes to policy. These policies weren't created. There is nothing Republicans are doing right now with Trump in the White House that they hadn't thought about 40 years ago. Tax cuts, really? How new is that? Mandates, eliminating, that's Republicanism at its finest. So when people talk about acquiescing, they're not acquiescing to the president, they're acquiescing to policy. That's who they are. And so I love Pam's point about you gotta play hardball first. Before you walk into a room, you got to know exactly where your votes lined up. There are very few surprises in the chamber, very few. You know what's going to go up and what's going to go down. I've been a part of signature campaigns where, everybody made this big deal where they go up and we just sat back and, you just wait for the fat lady to sing because you knew it was inevitable. So I think when people talk about what they don't know, let me just tell you, you know what you know. You don't need to know all this big stuff. You know what you know. You know how much better you want your life to be. And there are subsequent policies that follow it. You want a better education? There it is. You want better roads? There it is. You have to listen to people who espouse what you want. Voting is selfish. I tell people that all the time. It is not a broad thing. And too often,
Oh man, we lost Jimmy.
no, I'm sorry. We need to stop doing this, making everybody look like we are the world thing. No, voting is your world.
Okay, Jimmy, we lost you for a minute there, man. I don't know what's going on with you. Hope we can get you back in.
No, somebody was trying to call me. I'm
Okay.
good.
Let me just jump to Terry right quick because man, this time is going so fast, and we may go over a little bit because there's a couple things we really got to say. We
Great
really got
conversation. It's been a great conversation.
Terry, the NAACP is involved in Get Out the Vote every year. You have an intensive effort to get people to the polls. We do know that the absentee ballot request is higher than it has been ever. We've got a higher volume, and it looks like, of early voting. We don't know what that means in the long term because, like Jimmy says, Republicans vote, and that's one thing they do. The Democrats are the ones that we wonder if they're going to show up. What is the plan to get out the vote from the NAACP this year?
Well, that plan started about a year ago, and we're into the final countdown. Uh, so, you're a pastor. You got a letter from us that outlines some action steps that we're encouraging every clergy leader in this community to take, including encouraging their congregations to do social media to make sure that nobody has a reason why they can't get to the polls on election day, members of their congregation. So there are a number of steps. Picking up the phone and having people call other members of the congregation to make sure that they're inspired and motivated to go vote. On election day, we have a number of things that are already planned and set in motion that will involve people like yourself and others in the community. We've got a 3-hour radiothon on 4-hour radiothon that we've already contracted for on 107, where we'll be bringing on some community voices to encourage people to go vote. We've got we're going to use some social media. We've got a Facebook live stream that we're going to do for an hour. We're going to challenge people throughout the community who vote on election day in person to come out and give us a 5 or 10 second I voted statement, do a selfie, a video selfie, and have their little sticker on that says I voted. And we're going to try to get 1,000 people on election day to come on and do that and send that to us, and we'll post it. So we're having the conversations. Jimmy, you were talking about educating people about candidates. We're one of the major Black organizations that actually has sponsored candidate forums for the city council and the school board. We have endorsed the school district's bond millage, and we've put that out in a media statement. I've gotten a lot of positive feedback about that. As president of the NAACP, I'm actually on the campaign. John Pugh, several of the other executive committee members are a part of that effort. We're trying to get people enthused. That's about our kids. That's about our future. You can cry about the $30 a month it's going to cost you, but at the end of the day, if you don't want to do this for your children and do this for the community, then I don't know what it's all about.
Well, Terry, thank you. If people want to find out about what the NAACP has as information-wise, just contact the NAACP. I know they have opportunities for you to contact them. Pam, if you had to tell people why you think it's so important that they vote in the direction that you're encouraging them to vote, you've been comfortable naming the candidate that you're going to support. Tell us again why it's so important for you to see them rushing to the polls in mass numbers this year.
Yes. And let me, I always talk to my friends on the left. I get protest vote. This is just not the time to do that. And let me correct some of the numbers that I put out there when we first started. So we have nearly 30 million Americans who are now on unemployment. over almost 8 million Americans who have been infected with COVID. And we have 215,000 who have died due to COVID. And we have a president who's out there who has been infected, who has not only practiced fiction versus following the science, but is out there touting the fact that he had COVID and that he's there without a mask. And let me say this, when the president says something, I'm getting emails in my box. My box is getting flooded with emails asking me why kids have to wear masks to school. Why aren't all kids in school? Why aren't we all back out there getting herd immunity? So we can talk about local, but we know that his voice is carrying all the way down to local. When we talk about gerrymandering, when we talk about packing the judicial system, our politics, we're getting farther and farther away from the democracy that we know. We can talk about the 1 in 5 small businesses that have shuttered their doors. 41% of African American Black owned businesses in April closed their doors. Then we have, on the other hand, Biden and Harris, who have talked about the legal and the justice reforms that they want to see, who have called out racism when they see racism, who has looked at climate justice issues, who have said that they will follow science and not the fiction that Donald Trump is spewing. So never before have we been at a space that we're in. Pastor Jay, I don't even know. I'm not saying that you're old. You're just a little bit older than me. I don't know that you grew up in the 60s. You talk about the 60s. I won't say because I'll get
It was a long time after that, Pam. You don't have to say it. We know it.
But we haven't experienced this before. We have not experienced this before. We're talking about sanity versus insanity. It is important that we get out there and vote. There are people who fought hard, long and hard. For 400 years, our voice they've tried to suppress our voice. And here we are again. Don't let that happen. Please get out to vote and vote with enthusiasm. Know that your vote counts. Please tell others to vote with you. That's the type of enthusiasm that we need. Not just you going begrudgingly and voting, but taking people with you and making sure that they get to the poll. Have a plan. Start voting now. You don't have to vote on November 3rd. And be careful, because this is going to be a crazy time. Could be between now and January.
And that was such an impassioned plea. Jimmy, you know that I pay attention to everything you say. I pay attention to everything you don't say. I pay attention to how you frame things. And I've told people that you come from a conservative bent and a Republican bent, but this is a significant year even for you. You've seen your party is in a place that it's never been before. There are fractious divisions in the Republican Party that we've never seen. And so as a closing kind of statement, if you will, because we're already at a time, but I just want to finish this out. Can you just kind of share your heart, not only with why this is critical for everybody to be involved, but just where you are with what's going on in politics?
It is heartbreaking for me. You know, it's funny. We do reap what we sow sometimes, to get back to your biblical verses earlier on. When I had to defend as a Black Republican, I had to defend Ronald Reagan and Bush, and then Romney, McCain. I've had to defend a lot of Republicans who I'd run campaigns for. And I remember the condemnation, the charges of racism and misogynist, and I mean, you name it. Well, other than some of the stuff that followed Trump. But it's interesting to me that this man now is the demon they said the others were. And it is funny to me how now people applaud Romney for his integrity. and McCain for his courage, and Bush for his friendship with the Obamas. You know, in a way, it's validation, you know, when you work with people like that. But we forget, God, wasn't it nice when all we did was argue about issues, when we shouldn't have been in the Iraq War, or we shouldn't have ended affirmative action? To Pam's point and Terry's point, those were policy things. It's personal now. It ain't about policy. It is personal. There is personal disdain. I left the party in 2016 when I knew I couldn't support Donald Trump. I took a lot of flack from that, as you can imagine, from the right. And I left it. I ran Gary Johnson's Michigan campaign because I could not vote at the time. I couldn't reconcile my vote for Hillary Clinton, but I certainly couldn't vote for Donald Trump. I say this, and I want it to hit hard, and I really want you to feel it. But Black people are as responsible for Donald Trump's presidency as those white people that they talk about. The lack of coming out to vote, when you look at the numbers, in Black communities, that we didn't have an Obama running and that Hillary didn't move us and those kind of things, when you look at those numbers, and I say that because I want it to hurt and I want it to impact. I want people to understand that you own Donald Trump as much as the people who voted for him did. So don't complain, don't argue, don't fight, don't do all. You own this presidency. You did it. You look at Michigan, you own this. Look at Detroit's numbers and Saginaw, Flint, where we live. You got to own it. And the only reason you need to own it is so you can get out on November 3rd for redemption, period.
Well said. As the pastor of World Outreach Campus, I'm intimately connected to where we are. And I close this conversation by suggesting to everybody watching that if you read the Bible, every time you read about Jesus teaching or preaching, they talk about where he did it. They talk about the city. They talk about Jericho. They talk about Bethsaida. They talk about Jerusalem. If you read the New Testament beyond the Gospels, and you read in the Acts of the Apostles and on through the epistles, these epistles, these letters that Paul wrote, he wrote them to communities, the city of Corinth, the church at Corinth, the church at Ephesus, the church at Philippi. You cannot separate the church from the community and think that you're doing God's work. We have an investment in it. We have to be involved. And we have to pray, not only pray for those who are in authority, but we have to impact who will be in authority. It's funny because usually this is the time of our service that I would be inviting you to sow a seed in the ministry and to give. But tonight, those of you who are going to give, you do that. But tonight, I want you to focus on what you've heard. Terry Pruitt from the NAACP asked you, are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? There's ways up and down the ballot that you'll impact it. Pam Pugh asked you, is your life different today than it was 4 years ago? And what are you going to do to make it different? Jimmy Green says to you, if you didn't vote last time, what you have now is your fault. And I'm saying to you that it's time for us to get engaged. I appreciate those of you who have been with us throughout this whole time. I apologize if we didn't get to questions, but I think you were given some powerful insight. Thank you, Terry. Thank you for not only being my friend, but being a great addition to this conversation. Thank you, Jimmy. We will continue to spar and go after each other, but stand together. And Pam, you know, you're the darling of the World Outreach Campus in the political world. We love you and we appreciate you. For those of you who are watching, this has been Life in the Word from World Outreach Campus. And I'm Pastor Jay. God bless you and God keep you until next time.
Flip the ballot.
Go vote, folks.
Thank you.
Go vote.
Ballot.